So I have Ed Rudberg with me today, who is the CEO of Nucleic Sensing Systems. And Ed, you've got a really interesting background. I'd love to know from you a little bit about kind of your education, your entrepreneurial background, and everything that brought you to this point, and then what Nucleic Sensing Systems is.
Oh, sounds great, Paul. Growing up in Minnesota, I've always been connected to the water. My grandfather owned a marina. My grandmother lived on a lake. We were on the water all the time, fishing, boating, swimming, all of those things. And it really formed how I am connected to water as a water resource. And typically that had been a surface water resource as compared to sewage or drinking water or any of those parts of our sector, but obviously it's all connected. So getting a degree in undergraduate in biology, I realized, when I was back a triple major in biology, biochemistry, and chemistry, that there's a lot of really good, smart science people, but they're unable to communicate about their scientific knowledge outside of that small niche. And so I ended up dropping biochemistry and chemistry, much to my advisor's disagreement. And I quickly got a communications minor in my senior year. Really interested in how we communicate science from whether it be natural resource agencies, water agencies, or otherwise to public at large. Got a master's in marine affairs and policy from the University of Miami in Florida. Again, looking at and thinking about how we communicate science and how that affects our use of resources. And worked for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Biscayne Bay Aquatic Reserve, moved to Minnesota, worked for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency before going back for a PhD in natural resource science. Again, focus on surface waters and water issues that we're facing in Minnesota, but really that we're facing universally throughout the world. And really realized that it's not enough to do science, to do research. That isn't going to be compelling to have behavior change because so much of what we need is adoption of technologies, right? We need innovations. We have to have people that are thinking about new technologies, new solutions to the major problems that we're facing. And so, very typical entrepreneurs starting with very small things like making rain barrels with grad student labor and paying them in cash and pizza, and answering RFPs from around the country. I mean, that's really where I started my B2G sales. Moved on, bigger and better things, manure company, looking at how we can not dredge and fill peat bogs and having peat alternatives. Eventually got involved with doing Fortune 500 sustainability reports. Again, my interest today are being in water, but broadened it to things like the Carbon Disclosure Project and others. And then met my business partner for just networking. And he and I went to undergrad together and we started a company called CD3, which is infrastructure that goes at boat ramps to clean, drain, and dry boats to prevent invasive species from going from point A to point B because of their huge impact on water resources, particularly in the West, things like quagga and zebra mussels that can foul water infrastructure. And so our customers started asking us, they said, hey, what's in this water that we're pulling out? eDNA started to become a thing. And so between that and my wife working at the time at the Fish and Wildlife Service on the invasive carp issue for the Great Lakes region, it was a huge talking point in our family, environmental DNA. And it's really interesting because it's not very often that conservation brings new technologies to other verticals because they're so underfunded compared to even water, which we always complain about being underfunded. In conservation, we really fight over the little scraps that we have from a resource standpoint. But we realized when I met the original inventor of the technology that was the backbone of nucleic sensing systems at a conference, he had created a technology that was essentially taking a human diagnostic tool in the form of droplet digital PCR technology and bringing it into the fields for rapid analysis of quagga and zebra mussel, environmental DNA, and things like Lake Mead to identify hotspots. And we realized there was such an opportunity that he and I started talking. Just we're peanut butter and jelly when it comes to working together. So we set up a relationship with the University of Montana. And what we were able to do is really use SBIR grants to catapult this technology outside of the University of Montana to where we're at today. And where we're at today is a technology, like I said, that took a human diagnostic tool instead of swabbing our nose for COVID like we used to do, right? Said, yeah, you got COVID or no, you don't. This is akin to swabbing the environment's nose 20,000 times. And what that allows us to do with each sample is to identify a genetic concentration of environmental DNA in water. And we realized that its application was far more broader than invasive species detection. It can be drinking water and looking at the type of species that algae or otherwise that can foul infrastructure in drinking water, or can give bad taste or bad odors to drinking water from a product perspective, or diseases in aquaculture, because we can detect genetically disease as much as a month earlier than you can see physical manifestations of disease. So there's a lot of opportunity for genetic detection, even as we think ahead to things like the key areas of data that we need. We do a really good job at measuring physical and chemical parameters. YSI, all those different companies that have that abilities to measure pH, DO, temperature, all those kinds of things. But we're doing a terrible job at quantifying biology. Literally, people take nets and catch stuff, right? Like that is an antiquated way. It is a destructive way. And it doesn't give a sample to answer, if you will, in the timeliness that we need, whether it's putting a water bottle in the water and sending it off to a laboratory or otherwise. We think it's so important to give our customer sample to answer within an hour so that they can have the data that they need to take mitigative action, resulting in reducing costs, safeguarding human health, and making a more resilient food and water system. So that was long-winded, Paul. Did I answer all your questions?
You totally did. That's super interesting. Like, as somebody who knows a fair bit about, collection and distribution and how the kind of water industry on the whole, at least on like the, consumer and drinkable side works. I don't think, unless we're in touch with it all the time, we often think about kind of natural bodies of water where the intended use is not drinking, and how we still need to um, care for those areas. My question is, what is the alternative to this technology? What is the, usually in water there's a technological breakthrough, and then we're kind of replacing
Yeah.
some antiquated version of that. So what is that in
Yeah.
in your case?
So it's the lab, right? It's the human being taking their water bottle, dipping it in the water, bringing it back to a laboratory. And in some of the larger utilities, we're talking the Chicagos of the world, any of the LAs, any of the major ones will have biotechnicians. They'll have a lab. They'll be running ddPCR or PCR to understand what's going on, looking for denitrifiers or you name it, right? In wastewater or otherwise. That's the precedent technology. Or maybe they're taking a water sample, they're sending it off to an off-site laboratory. Takes time. You get an answer in, maybe a month, a couple weeks. Everything is being delayed because what you're doing is looking at a snapshot in time, and that it backcasts, right, as compared to getting that sample to answer. And so we're addressing two things. One, automation. We really see automation in everything in this world right now. So the ability to collect the data automatically, but also killing that time lag between sample to answer so that we can be responsive in these systems, whether it be drinking water systems, wastewater systems, aquaculture systems. They all rely to some extent on biology in the case of wastewater and aquaculture, or are impacted by biology in the form of drinking water. And we just don't measure it efficiently, at least.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You've built what sounds like a potentially game changer technology. What I've noticed in this industry is there's often a big gap between when cool technology comes out and when customers start writing checks for the cool technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
What has been your experience in kind of bridging that gap in this industry?
So there's a couple of different ways that we've approached it. I think people like Imagine H2O, people like Current, people like Climate Haven, these are organizations that are there to help bridge that gap, right? To be a catalyst for innovation, to bring and connect companies with customers, in some cases even provide funding. The issue, I think, is that valley of death, as we all call it, between, hey, we're starting to pilot things, and then adoptions of the technology and sales. And I think these groups have been absolutely instrumental. in not only helping entrepreneurs in their process and making sure you have the right story and doing all those things, but also the connection and being these nodes between a customer and startup. And we're looking, because we know that this is a time lag. So we're looking at things like aquaculture and animal health and other ways that we can bridge that gap in B2B sales as water technology kind of comes up to speed. And that's, as tough as it is, you talk to a venture capital and they're like, "Oh, you need to be laser focused, laser." Well, it's great to be laser focused, but what if that laser focus is on an industry that's slow to adopt technologies? To your point, so in our case, and I think it is for many, you have to find a phased opportunity that you can grab onto a beachhead market that's more quickly adopting as while you're doing pilots so that you can generate that momentum, you can get those sales to get the capital to move everything forward in the plan and have that adoption take place over that longer period of time while not having your company fall by the wayside.
How do you, let me back up. Many times, as someone who has pitched a new technology to people who've been running a water utility for decades, oftentimes we run into the obstacle in the sales cycle of, well, I've been doing this for a long time, and the way I do it works fine. Like, it might be inefficient, but it works fine. So, I'm interested in like what you tell somebody. What is how do you explain the value proposition of NS2 to somebody who's been sending in samples for like 30 years?
What we talk about is a couple of things. One is cost. I mean, what is your pain point, right? And how can we address that pain point? And I think it's just really interesting. With those very, focusing on wastewater, for example, already have those folks that they have a team, they have a lab. This is already something they're doing. They understand the data, right? They already own a droplet digital PCR machine, and that's an easier discussion because they say, hey, we just put this in the field, and you're just going to get data on your computer and setting running plates and doing all this, and that is more intuitive. Then you have a more of a side to side replacement. When you're looking at those midsize, that they are operators that are kind of those mid-sized communities that maybe are outsourcing to engineering companies or otherwise, they have a business drive then to reduce costs, reduce energy, all those things that we're hoping to do for these utilities. And we're early too. We're very much still in the pilot stage, and these conversations are easier to have, at least in the preliminary, because we're not asking for a check yet. We're asking to learn about what their pain points are and talk to them about it. And what I'm finding is people are really open to talking about their pain points, especially if you are listening as a CEO to say, I want to help you with those pain points. How could we help you with these pain points, and being very interested in the customer and what their needs are. And I think, hey, they may have been doing it for 30 years, but something can be a pain in the ass for 30 years. Part of my
Yeah,
French. And if you can help it not be, it's a great opportunity.
definitely. What has given that you're going after pilots, not necessarily paid customers yet, what has surprised you most about your sales cycle?
I've been surprised at how many people have reached out to us directly. And that's been a great opportunity for us. And it's terrible as, as a CEO to say, I'd love to sell you something today, but I can't. And that's, for us, being deep tech and water is tough, right? Deep tech in general right now is hard to find the funding, the time cycle, all those things, the risks. It's tough. But when you have people that are calling you and that are interested in your technology, it gets you excited and to think that, okay, well, we might have found something here, and we got to get through these next steps so that we can really push and talk to those customers and be in front of them and start showing real data that could really change how they do business.
That's a good segue to what I wanted to talk about next was fundraising in general in this industry, and what are the kind of nooks and crannies of water and environmental startup fundraising. So I would say water tech startups tend to face a unique challenge. We're typically not offering SaaS solutions, right? So you can't just have like hockey stick adoption. Like you said, deep tech is usually, or at least some engineered component is usually a factor. So our development cycles are long. It's capital intensive on equipment. The customer base is conservative in terms of adoption. Just give me your take loosely on the kind of funding landscape of a water company in
Yeah.
general, or a company going after these
Yeah.
these types of businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard. Without question, it's hard, right? And I think, I tell people that we were one snowpack season away in the Sierras of really valuing water in this country. I think you're seeing other communities in South Africa, in Mexico City, and others starting to value water. I mean, you got 3 days to figure it out. 3 days. And I think that hasn't, we're just not a proactive society in the United States. We are looking for solutions that all of a sudden have a really big problem. And that's too late. We need to be looking ahead to solving solutions that we think we will have in the future. And more importantly, we know we have. We know that our demand for water is going to continue to increase. We know that we need to find ways to do a better job at doing that. But when it comes to funding, we just have the goals, the goal line's moving, right? And it's like, how do you, as a deep tech company, well, do you have sales yet? Well, it's like, well, we're in a prototype. We can't sell anything yet, right? It takes too much time to be with that customer, and we have to still operate it. And so that's where I think these other organizations stepping up to the plate, like Imagine H2O and Current and otherwise, are so important, because we have to show our ability to get traction. And we've been very lucky. We just did get a contract with a major water utility. So that, and that's us bringing our machine out, and that's going to be a big leap for us to be able to show that people are willing to pay for our technology. But yeah, to your point, and you're right on, which is conservative customer base. Hardware is a real problem, and there's no such thing as having a 25-year-old stay up all night drinking Red Bulls coding for AI or SaaS, right? It's just a different approach. And yet I think there are groups and there are people out there that are really understanding and really valuing hardware and something tangible and tech that has a real world impact, not only financially but also environmentally or otherwise.
Without kind of throwing the politics in, I think the realities of the last, year or so in especially in startups in our industry is that we've kind of had some, ground shift underneath our feet in terms of like what we're valuing right now and where the funding's going in the government. And so how has that affected your talks with investors, or how has that kind of changed things?
Well, I think the good thing is that we, the economy aside, right? The economy is going to be the big driver here. And when the economy is good, when dollars are moving, it's better for everyone, regardless of who's in office. And I think we can't escape that the economy isn't what we would hope it to be today. Uh, and so, things shift, and priorities shift, to your point, in governmental agencies and organizations. I think that for startups or otherwise, it doesn't necessarily change, right? Your value proposition still has to be focused on a return on investment. It can't be rainbows and positivity and all these kinds of things, because at some point someone's not necessarily going to write a check for that, right? It
You
has to
can't
have an
necessarily
impact on their
lean on
operations.
you can't lean on like a kind of do good motivation for some of these buyers. Like it has to be that plus it's saving us money, or it's saving us time, or increasing productivity, right?
Well, and I think it's always been that, right? And if you take a look at any product, right, you have to lean forward with or at least I think you should lean forward that this is a better product and you're going to have cost savings or you're going to have these positive impacts from a business perspective. And you can also feel good about, employing it because it does these other side benefits. And I don't think in this administration or otherwise, anyone wants to have people having, you know, dirty water or inefficient systems or anything like that. Um, so I will take a quick moment, and it's a bit of making my own segue but to plug SBIRs, because I think it's so important that we continue at the federal government to support SBIR programs, because that's how we got our funding to get off the ground, and I don't see that necessarily going away. I really hope that that continues to move forward with this administration, and we can continue to lead the world when it comes to technology development, because especially in deep tech, we have an opportunity to lead the world. And we need to do so. And I think that between DARPA and SBIR and these types of federal programs really can push that.
Is that a value prop based fundraising ecosystem similar to VC when you kind of also have to pitch them as a pseudo customer? Or is that kind of a different kind of activity altogether?
So value based on like personal values, is that, or value based on dollars and cents?
Dollars and cents, like cool technology. Are you pitching for SBIR funding, or just tell me a little bit how that works? I don't know anything about it.
Sure. SBIR funding is very different. It's you're writing essentially a research proposal.
Gotcha.
The difficulty is for many companies is that it's nice to have someone with a PhD because that's the type of writing they're expecting. So and they're looking for that, and hey, what kind of academic papers have you written? And so there are things that I think can be improved on the SBIR side to make it less of an arduous process, but it's very much a very, heavy lift grant application. 15 pages, academically sourced introduction, that kind of, and you still certainly have opportunities to pitch and work on the deck as you move forward with an SBIR2, but it's again largely around a scientific question, at least in the beginning.
Gotcha. It's a totally different scenario. Got it. Back to industry adoption. From your vantage point, what would you say is driving change? When a utility or one of your target buyers says yes, like what is it that's pushing them to do that?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things that are helping a lot. We talked about a little bit Imagine H2O and Current and the you have these organizations like Climate Haven and others that are making the introductions. You also have like things like IELT, right? That are making those introductions, that are allowing you to leverage communities that want to, or the organizations that want to be on the cutting edge and be the champions of new technology. And so I think that those support systems are critical. And I'm now repeating myself, but in getting in front of those customers, and at least even, I didn't, my background is in natural resource management. I hadn't worked on water in decades, right? And so, to, if nothing else, meet people and walk into a room at WEFTech and know people. I mean, just like anything else, right? People do business with people. And if you're a stranger, it makes it even harder. And so having those networking opportunities to just to talk to people and learn about the issues that they're facing has been critical.
Are VCs in water getting warmer to this deep tech?
Um, I when I have a check written to me, I'll tell you yes. I think they are warming to the idea. I think we got to provide, and on our end, we got to provide the data, right? We got to provide the data. We got to show the ROI, and there are paths to get there. I don't think, it's hard. Early investment is really, really hard. And I think that is something that I hope we see changing in the future. And how do we How can we expect hockey stick growth, to your point, from deep tech companies? It's not SaaS. The you know, venture capital markets, if they want to close in 5, well, deep tech might take 8. It might take 10. Are we expecting quarterly returns? Or are we expecting a return in a decade? What is realistic for these types of companies? I think, AI has sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room, but I think I share the concerns that many do. That are we doing this yet again? Right? When we had dot coms that were nothing more than a website being overvalued when they maybe didn't even have a warehouse for goods, right? And we did it in real estate, and now we're doing it maybe in AI because it becomes
Crypto.
a
Yeah.
buzzword more than a thing, right? A real thing, a tangible thing. You get burned a couple times. Maybe you realize that that slow, steady growth might actually provide a lot of return on investment and value, while mitigating some of that risk of being the person that buys the tulips at the end.
And is adding some good to the world, right? Like it's a
Yeah,
tangible service that is something that we need in a big way.
absolutely.
I'm gonna kind of shift gears a little bit, and you gave me kind of a layup, so I'll just take it. Looking forward to next year, and potentially beyond that. You mentioned AI. I don't want to just be like a an AI parrot, but I think it's interesting to pepper into almost any conversation these days because it's capturing such a great share of imagination from not just investors, but I think everybody to some degree. What
Absolutely.
trends are you seeing or are you betting on that could change the game potentially for companies like NS2? Is it technology, regulation, market dynamics, anything you're paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're trying to provide data, right? My PhD focused on predictive modeling and using multivariate regression, which is way too nerdy to get into. But the idea is that you have an outcome, right? And you can predict that outcome based on all the data that goes into it, right? And that's the bedrock of any AI is predictive. And so what we are banking on is that the garbage in, garbage out mentality of data, right? And if we can provide the key data for, in a wastewater treatment facility, for example, making sure that the right biology is there, and if it's changing over time, how can then we be predictive of biology? How can we help provide the data that the operators can make changes to optimize systems? We're banking on the fact that these systems are going to change. We've seen it in California, right? When you say, "Hey, you can't use as much water." Well, what does that mean for a wastewater utility? What does it mean when all these people move into a community and all of a sudden you need more out of the infrastructure you have? And so there need to be efficiencies gained. There needs to be, and that is all that AI can apply, whether it be from the human resources side, from the optimization of your plant side. It's going to impact everyone's work, but we're banking on the fact that it needs good data and we can provide that.
With data computation and smashing all of that data and getting into predictability and things like that, are you guys even like raising an eyebrow to AI or some sort of like predictive modeling in that way, or is this something that is like gonna stay in house and kind of be a homegrown thing?
So I think there are a couple opportunities for us. There are AI companies that are in each of these verticals that we could provide our data to, right? And essentially be a data company that's selling data so that they can help be more predictive. You know, we're I don't want to be yet one more company necessarily that is providing this suite or platform for these companies. I don't think that makes sense. I think other companies are doing it. We need to be part of a solution suite, whether it's on the data side or even on the technology side, right? I always say, well, we don't provide the Tylenol that takes your kid's fever down. We provide the thermometer that tells you your kid has a fever. So we're looking at really a partnership model, whether it be on the AI side or the hardware side, to bring value to our customers to address their pain points.
Is there, I know this is like a, fire alarm word one way or the other, but is, the changing climate or is climate change creating new monitoring needs when it comes to our bodies of water?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think regardless of people's belief on the core cause of human climate change, I think we can all agree that we're seeing different water precipitation patterns. We're seeing changing species in different areas. I mean, look at Zika in South Florida, right? Like there are issues that we cannot deny, regardless of our political spectrum. It's just how we address those, and I think one of those key ways on how we address those is measuring them, right? You can't fix what you cannot measure, right? And that's really where we try to be agnostic to people's political views, if you will, and really focus on the fact that, hey, you're seeing different levels of water in your reservoir, and so you need to optimize how much water you're taking out. You're seeing changes in the population of your community. So you need to be more efficient with your drinking water. You need to be more efficient with your wastewater processing. We're just living in a more dynamic world when it comes to either the environment or population changes or otherwise. And we need to be able to measure those things that are critical for the resiliency of our water infrastructure or food infrastructure for that matter when it comes to animal health.
Last question. What's one thing you wish you'd known 3 years ago? Um, and what would you tell your future self?
Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be real hard. And I've taken on different businesses and different verticals, doing different types of things. And I tell you what, deep tech is hard, and it's going to take more time and more money than you ever thought it would. But if we can get there and get to the other side of it, there's the real ability to have a positive impact on our economy and our world.
I'll throw in last question B. What would you tell somebody who is starting a tech company in the water industry right now? If you wanted to help them grease the skids a little bit, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell them to, you know what, I've been doing plugs for the nonprofits and those other groups in water. Get involved with them. Apply. It's hard to get in, but get to know these groups that they're mission driven, and that mission is to help entrepreneurs. Cleveland, Cleveland Water. All there are many different groups that their number one goal is to find technologies and connect to people, and connect to customers. And that is so absolutely critical to these companies. And know that you're going to have to learn a lot about your customer and what their pain points are, and be willing to pivot if your perceived pain point isn't their actual pain point.
Well, Ed, this has been awesome. I super appreciate your time and all your
Absolutely.
insight. If anyone wants to learn more about NS2 or connect with you, where should they find you?
Sure. We have ns2co.com, which you can find our website. You can email me at ed@ns2co.com, or our phone number's on our website too. So feel free to reach out. Really appreciate it. Or connect on LinkedIn too. All those things are a great way to get a hold of me.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it.